Hi there. Welcome to the Lifestyle Herbalist Podcast, where we hope to bring you a healthy dose of happiness. I'm your host, Dabney Vaccaro, clinical herbalist, health coach, lover of plants.
And I'm Sabrina Cooper, registered culinary holistic nutritionist and herbalist. Join us as we dive into the art of herbalism, mindfulness, and healthy lifestyle practices to help you achieve a happier and healthier life. Whether you're a seasoned herbalist or just starting your wellness journey, we're here to provide you with the insights, tips, and inspiration for a more balanced and joyful existence. So grab your favorite herbal tea, sit back, and let's get a healthy dose of happiness together.
Welcome back to the Lifestyle Herbalist. I'm here with Brian Carr and Sabrina. And Brian is the co-founder of We Inspect. And this company is more than just a mold inspection service. They are a partner in reclaiming health and restoring a sense of security. They've been trusted by hundreds of medical experts in functional medicine and bring clarity to the complex and often hidden world of mold-related health issues. They help to identify the first signs of mold and guide their customers through a comprehensive mediation strategy. Brian, we're happy to have you here, and I would love to know your story and how this company actually got started.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I love the opportunity to chat with people. So thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who's listening. So yeah, my story. Well, I'll tell you this. Most people don't go to school to be a mold person. That's not what they do. Most people that are in this industry with a specialization in understanding the home health connection and really helping to optimize individuals' health, they're usually impacted by it by some way, or maybe someone they know is impacted by it in some way. And that's kind of like how the door opens to even consider this. And, that's what happened with me. In the late 2000s, I lived in an apartment in West Hollywood in California, and all those buildings are old. There was a pipe leak in the ceiling above my bedroom. And it was like a very fast thing. Like it almost felt like it was happening in slow motion. I like look up and I see the stain spreading, and then I see the ceiling starting to kind of create that dip, like when water's filling like a blister or something, right? I'm like, oh my God, this thing is going to fall on me. And I jump out of my bed with my computer, and water falls down onto my bed. It was like this whole
my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
So, I do what everybody does when you live in an apartment or you live in a house and you have a landlord and it's not your place. You call your landlord, you're like, hey, come fix this thing. This thing happened, right? And so they came, somebody was really quick. They shut the water off, and kind of like handled everything, quote, handled everything and said, okay, you're good. Time goes by, weeks, couple months, and I start having symptoms I never had before, right? The two big things for me, first was cognitive brain issues. Not like severe brain issues, but I'm like really sharp. I, speak really quickly, like it's just kind of who I am. And I started noticing that sharpness was getting a little duller, right? Like it was maybe taking me a minute. Like I wasn't really just like kind of the same that I had been. And so that alone is kind of weird, right? And then I wake up one day, I go to wash my face, and my face had broken out in like eczema, like all over my face. And so I started having like skin issues and things that were kind of coming up from this stuff. And so at the time, I was dating who is now my wife, but at the time we were only dating for a few months at the time. Her dad, who ended up being my mentor and the person who brought me into this whole thing, is one of the top experts in this field in the entire country. And one of the most respected guys that do this and know how to do it really well and really specialize in that kind of health focused view of how we go through this process. And she's like, you sound like a lot of my dad's clients, like what you're talking about. And I know you had this water thing that happened, right? You might have a mold problem, right? I'm like, oh, that's weird. Okay. So then what do? I do what everybody does. I call the landlord. I'm like, hey, I think I might have a mold problem. And what do? They send some guy out here with an air sample pump in the middle of my room for 5 minutes, and they leave. And they're like, oh, air's fine. Can't be us. It's you. You're going nuts, right? And that's what happens to so many people. They start developing symptoms, and they could be across different systems in the body. It can manifest in so many different ways. And they get kind of gaslit. They're like, oh, it's it's you. It's not the house. It's not the building. It's not this. You must have a problem with you, right? And if they can't figure it out, you must need meds. Like that's just kind of like where they push you, right?
Mhm.
And so after that, I ultimately ended up having my father-in-law now come in to look at my place. I didn't want to do it right away because like I was just dating his daughter. Like it was weird.
Didn't
Um,
become a
You're like, look at me,
project.
I have a mold problem. Don't judge me on it, you know?
yeah. Well, what's funny is that like there's it's so funny that you say that because there's this stigma that like a
Right.
mold issue in a house means that like you're dirty or you don't take care of
Right.
your house or it's gross or every single house has mold in it. Every single one. I've been doing this for like a decade plus. I could count on one hand the number of times I've been into a house and didn't really find anything that was going on. That's it. In the 10, however many years I've been doing this, right? And so it's just a matter of like, where is it? How significant is it? And who's the person living in the house? And are they being impacted by it?
Mhm.
Right. And it's just kind of like a formula that goes together. But, anyways, he comes in and what he ends up finding is that when water, so it's a lot of water I described, right? So your ceiling is a horizontal surface, right? So imagine like your kitchen island and you pour like a whole bottle of water on your kitchen island. What's it do? It goes sideways, right? And then
Mhm.
once it gets to the end of the island, there's nowhere more to go sideways. So where does it go? It goes down, right? Gravity's gonna bring it down. So my room, ceiling, water spread sideways, went to all my walls, went down all my walls. I had mold issues in all of my walls surrounding my bed where I slept every single night.
Mhm.
And an air sample in the middle of a room that this guy did said everything was fine, which is a whole nother conversation we can have. And so, anyways, that's kind of what opened my eyes to it. He helped me get out of the lease and do some stuff and like figure it out. And so that happened. And then I mentioned it was kind of late 2000s. That's when there was, for those who were around and remembering, there was an economic downturn at that time. And I had just been laid off of my job. And so when I was on my computer in my bed before everything fell on me, I was actually on monster.com looking for jobs. And I immediately told him afterwards, like, I want to do this. This, like, I saw what this other guy did. I saw what you did. I saw what happened to me. I saw where I am now. This is something that actually seems fulfilling and something that I think that I could get into, right? And so that was kind of the start of it. And then I started working with him, and then ultimately, several years down the road, we ended up absorbing his business. He has a twin brother on the East Coast, and then myself and my cousin, who is his twin brother's son. It's very, the family business is complicated. So my father-in-law has a twin brother. He has a son. His name is Corey. Um,
Mm.
I'm the son-in-law over here and under that side. And so myself and Corey then created We Inspect because we were getting inquiries and referrals from doctors all over the country. But at the time, we were still created and set up as just local businesses. So what Mark had done and his twin brother Steve, and ultimately what transitioned into us doing is we started going to these medical conferences that were environmental focused medical conferences, functional medicine, environmental medicine, stuff like that. And then we started actually presenting at them. And now I actually train and teach doctors on all of this stuff. And so because of that, people wanted to start sending all their patients to us because they start realizing what's going on. And so at that time, Corey and I are like, we need to figure out how to serve more people because this is obviously a thing that doesn't just happen in LA and New York. And it's not fair for somebody in, Denver to not be allowed to have this done the right way because they happen to live in Denver, right? Like that's not their fault. It's 2020, whatever it was at the time. Like it's the future. Like we should be able to figure this out. And so what we did is that we worked with Mark and Steve, and we basically consolidated all the businesses together, created We Inspect, and that's sort of how it happened.
Wow. It's quite a journey, quite a story. Uh,
Yeah, it's fun to
yeah.
talk about.
Yeah.
Well, it's like interesting that synchronicity of like that this happened to you, and then like the girl that you were dating was actually like, involved, like had someone involved in the whole mold industry, right? So it's kind of like it was like helpful. Imagine if like where would you have been if that wasn't the case, and how long would you have gone with all these symptoms and not feeling well and lived there or, even figured that out?
I've gone down that road before too, and I would have ended up sick, and I probably would have
Yeah.
ended up with a more long-term chronic thing that wasn't able to kind of resolve itself pretty quickly because I handled the exposure really quickly. And unfortunately, that happens to a lot of people. They just don't know, right? So you start developing these complex health issues and these things that are going on. And then, the body is now it's out of whack. there's a lot of work that then has to be done on the body to kind of realign itself with what
Right.
it's really meant to do, which is to help detox and function properly and do what it needs to do. But any of the doctors that are really mold literate doctors on, functional integrative, whatever it is, and you're dealing with some other sort of health issue, you're dealing with Lyme, you're dealing with autoimmune issues, you're dealing with, autism, pandas, or even more like chronic things like chronic fatigue and like all these things, there's a trigger that's causing those things to either originally happen or to exasperate what's happening with them. And so the idea is like if we can get all the way back down to the root, root cause, it's the big phrase, right? Root cause medicine. If you can get down to the thing that's triggering the reactions across those different areas in the body and you remove that, now all of a sudden all those things they start to diminish, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of those doctors will say, like, listen, we can only do so much if you are still in the environment where you're being exposed to this stuff. And the big piece here and the big important piece is removing that exposure, which will then allow us like a better foundation to start building protocols and things that will help you get there. So a lot of times people they'll start working with a doctor, maybe they'll start to improve in whatever their health issue is, right? And then maybe they'll start to plateau, and then sometimes they even start to come down a little bit. And like when that happens, it's a huge clue that there's an environmental trigger happening where there's only so much that the supplements and the detoxing and all those things can do.
And it's interesting you say that because I lived in Italy for a little while and they had transformed these houses, these little apartments from like these were horse stalls. They were horse stalls back in the day. And it was this old building with concrete walls. That's how they do things in Italy, right? They're not like our homes. And so when I moved into this apartment, I started getting really sick and I was coughing a lot and I had chest issues. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't feel myself. Like everything just felt off. I mean, there were a lot of symptoms. But I thought, okay, it's just old. Then I started noticing that there was like fluff like on the wall,
Hmm.
and it's starting to turn orangey yellow, like an orangey color. And I
Hmm.
was like, there's mold like on my walls. And then I started to think that was it. And I tell people, I think this is like mold. I think we need to do something. I think that's what's making me sick. And they thought that I was crazy, like literally thought, just wipe it down. So I was like, okay, like take some bleach. I did that and it came back, and it keep coming back. And finally they had to dig out like so much of the wall. The landlord didn't want to do it, but finally he did it. And there was X amount like that was just wet and gross. And they had to take it all out. And it probably was still in there for the time that I was there. And that's probably why I got all these immune disorder. Like, I had Hashimoto, like because of thyroid issue, because of that, probably over time. And I'd feel better and then I'd dip. And so it's interesting, and then people just, like you said, think that you're crazy because you're just making up some story. But yeah.
Yeah, it's a really common, what you described is really common for people, right? I mean, you at least kind of like saw like a clue and started driving somebody to try to do something about, it. But a lot of times that stuff is hidden in the houses. And
Yeah.
so, you're not able to see what's happening there, but it's, behind the shower, it's under a sink cabinet, or it's in a ceiling or in a wall. And then it's like, okay, how do you figure out where those things are, right? And that's what We Inspect does. That's really where we shine.
Yeah. Well, I think about like your story was pretty acute. So you had the water leak, it blew, and so you knew like this is happening. But it
Yep.
makes me think how many other places like in our homes maybe has a slow leak, or maybe there's a little spot in the roof and just when it rains hard, it gets really bad for a day or two. The mold grows, it's already in a little place, the wood gets wet, and it just happens over just a long, slow period of time. And I know for myself, when somebody doesn't feel well, like we give ourselves excuses.
Yep.
And sometimes when we give ourselves excuses, we don't really think about like what's causing that to happen. And so it can go off the radar. So, what are some symptoms that people should look for?
That's a really, really good point that you make there. It's like normal human nature to rationalize stuff if you can't see it with your eyes. We rely so much on our eyes that if they don't see something, then it must not be there. And you start rationalizing something around why something is happening. It's really, so I'm glad that you mentioned that because it's very true. Um, as far as symptoms and different, God, there's so many. And this is what makes diagnosing a mold related illness really difficult for practitioners because it's not like I go in and this one blood test is here, and that means I have X, right? There's certain things that lines up really easily for, and then like this doesn't really work that way. So when you're thinking about how like mold impacts the body, there's a few different ways it can impact the body. One is an immediate immune response, right? So that is I breathe something in, immune response, right? So that's the first way that you can get impacted. The other is more of a like longer term chronic inflammatory response that happens in the body. And that can happen from either, elongated exposure to a mold issue, or if you have mold toxins, which are called mycotoxins that kind of impact your body, and they'll kind of embed themselves in your cellular structure. And then it creates kind of puts your body's immune system, think of them like soldiers, it puts them on DEFCON 5 at all the time, right? And they're just constantly, there's something going on, there's something going on. And so inflammation ultimately is a, if not the biggest, one of the biggest causes of so many health issues that go on in our bodies. And so the inflammatory response that comes off of continued exposure, now it can manifest anywhere in the body, depending on where the weak link in the body is, right? And so that's where the challenge is, right? Like if one of my areas are really good at detoxing, but another one isn't, then it's going to maybe manifest there, right? So for example, if my skin detox pathway isn't great, which was probably what was happening for me, but maybe I was able to detox things out other ways, and it gets stuck in that skin sort of area, it gets clogged, and it starts manifesting a problem there, right? There's other people where, if their gut is damaged more so than someone else's, and that's an easier pathway to get out into the bloodstream, which is then an easier pathway to get up to the brain, which then creates more of your neurological issues or some of your nervous system issues, right? So really it's the different systems in the body and looking for symptoms that are occurring in them. And there's a couple things to keep in mind. One, if you have multiple symptoms across multiple systems, that's a big clue, right? So for me, I had neuro and I had skin. I had two things that were happening, right? So I have two systems in my body and I had symptoms across both of them. So that's a really big red flag, right? So if you think systems in your body, you have your nervous system, you have your digestive system, you have your reproductive system, you have hormones and all that stuff that ties into that. So there's a lot of different systems in the body. So that's one piece. If you're seeing symptoms that are happening in multiple areas, it's like, okay, why is my body kind of like freaking out everywhere or in multiple places, as opposed to I ate bad food and I have food poisoning, my stomach hurts, right? Like that's a very like acute thing tied to a problem, right? But when you are breathing air in, your breath not only impacts into your lungs, it also impacts directly into your gut. And it also has a direct path line up towards your brain area.
Right.
So you have multiple areas where what you're breathing can impact, and that even extends the ease that it can get to different body systems in the body. So for example, when you breathe in through your nose, right? So in your nose, everybody's had postnasal drip at some point in time, right? So now that drips down into your gut, that doesn't drip into your lungs, right? So now if you're breathing things and it gets into your sinuses and it gets up into there, and then you have that stuff that drips down, you now have a direct pathway into your stomach and your gut. And you can now start seeing gut dysregulation and leaky gut and all the things that happen in a gut now, right? If you're breathing in and you have an excess of either mold toxins or even just mold organisms that are getting in there and throwing off the ecosystem of the gut, for example. You also have a direct pathway up close to the brain. So a lot of times brain fog is a pretty common effect that happens with people because you're breathing straight into that area and there's not a whole lot of protection between there, right? So there's a lot of ways it can work. So the one thing is multi-system, multi-symptom. The next one, if we're thinking symptoms and things like that, if you leave your house and you feel better, and then you come home and you don't feel good, that is a huge, huge thing. Now, most times when we leave our house because we're going on vacation or something, right? So then what do? We rationalize it. We're like,
I've just been
no
like,
kids, no
yeah,
work, no stress. I'm by the pool. Of course I feel better, right? I'm outside. I'm doing all these things. Then you come home. Most people don't notice the feel better piece. They notice when they come back, it feels like they got punched in the face. Like that's where you feel. You're like, oh, I don't feel anywhere as good as I did before, right? That's a really, really big clue because if you leave and you come back and your body bounced back a little bit in the short time you were gone, which is a really good sign, and then you come back and then you feel bad again, it's a really big clue that there's something happening here, but also it's promising Because if you did bounce back a little bit on a 3 or 4 day vacation or whatever it is, that means like removing yourself from an exposure or reducing an exposure in the house may have a more significant impact on you than somebody who has like a really long-term chronic thing that's going on. So it's like a pretty positive look on that type of situation.
Mhm.
The other thing is if there's multiple people in your house who all have something else going on,
Mhm.
right? So you don't have to have more than one person in the house with symptoms, right? That a lot of times is something that almost clouds someone's view of potential home problem because they're like, we're all breathing the same air, only one person is sick. So it can't be the house because we're all in the same house, right? It's like rationally, I can understand the argument. The problem is our bodies are so different from everybody's. Like my response to that is like, has there ever been a time where you got the flu and your husband or wife didn't? They're like, well, yeah. Like, why? You guys are breathing the same air. How's that possible?
Probably
Is it
eating
because
the
your
same
immune
food.
system is maybe a little stronger than that immune system?
Right.
Wait, it's something you can't see with your eyes that you breathe that caused somebody to have a physical reaction? Is that the exact same thing that mold is? It's the exact same trigger. It's just not a virus. It's a
Right.
particle that's triggering an immune response, right? So like that's always my response to that. And I love that response.
Yeah.
So if you have multiple people in the house that are all like dealing with different things, they don't have to be severe, right? Like, oh, my daughter's got like this just chronic cough thing that's going on, and maybe you have brain fog, and maybe your husband is having digestive issues, and like you kind of see things going on all over the place, and they're not all related to the same symptom thing, right? But if everybody has something going on, that's another clue that there's something in the air environmentally that's triggering them, and then it's just manifesting in their body in different ways. So those are things that you can look at as like little clues there might be something going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to you talk about like nasal breathing, and as dental hygienist, we know firsthand that there is a large number of people who don't nasal breathe. They actually mouth breathe. And so they don't even get the protective um, mechanisms of our nose. They breathe in their mouth, it goes right into their lungs. And so they are even, I would think, a higher risk of
It's a
having.
great point because we have natural filtration kind of built into our body when you go through your nose, right? But if you bypass that filter, then you're just getting it all in there. So it's a very, very good point too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course there's oral effects that go along with mouth breathing as well. So yeah, I was surprised to know how when I became a hygienist, how many people actually mouth breathe. It wasn't something I ever thought about before, but there's a
My wife and I look like mummies when we sleep. It's mouth taped, it's
oh,
eye masks on, it's like the whole thing. We like, God forbid somebody walks in the room and sees us there, they'd be scared.
They'll run the other direction.
Yeah, yeah, but
yeah.
it's very helpful, just like sleep quality and all that stuff. You see the improvements, so it's good.
So what things do you notice with this mold issue? How does it affect children?
It can have a pretty significant impact on children. A couple reasons. One, their immune systems aren't fully developed. So a child's immune system doesn't really fully develop until they're late teens, near 20. Like that's when you get like a fully developed adult immune system is around that time, right? So when you're younger, again, I feel like there's two ways it kind of impacts. One is a more kind of right now kind of impact, like it's impacting them right now. The other is it's setting the stage in their body for future problems down the road. So there's kind of like three ways that why somebody might react to something when someone doesn't. Kind of we were just talking about the flu and that sort of thing. One is your genetic makeup, right? So there's a certain percentage of people that just genetically can't detox as well. It's about 24% of people. And so for them, they're just gonna show symptoms more, right? Because they can't get stuff out of their body as easily. The second one is your current health position right now, right? So your immune system can only handle so much, right? And so if you're loading on, like if you have a baseline of Lyme disease and then you add on mold exposure on the top, you're going to trigger and start seeing symptoms faster than somebody who just is being exposed to mold and they don't have the baseline immune taxing that the Lyme is putting on them, for example, right? So that's your second is your current health position. And then your third is previous exposures. And this is really important when you start talking about kids and where they grew up and all these things. If you grew up in a place, say you grew up in the Midwest and there was, you lived in a basement, there was mold in the basement, right? The rooms were in the basement or whatever. Your body is now being trained to be on red alert when it sees specific things, right?
Mhm.
So it's kind of like that Pavlov's dog response kind of thing, right? Like the dog sees something or hears something and then reacts, right? And it just becomes kind of a natural trigger for the dog, right? Well, our immune systems are similar in ways where if we were exposed to something and that something impacted our body, our little immune soldiers now see that and they're like, oh, this is a threat. This thing is a problem, right? So then even if later in life you're exposed to it at a lower dose or a lower amount, your body still sees it and it has, think of it as the trauma that occurred when you were a kid when it came in and it was attacking you, right? And so then the body just goes. It's like bam, right? A lot of times autoimmune is sort of tied into that because then the body sees this thing and it has like a really aggressive response, right? And so you could kind of make the correlation that, maybe that's part of why it even developed in the first place, potentially. So those are the three things. So when you're a kid, you're either, because your immune system isn't fully set up yet, you're either getting impact immediately, right? And impact immediately, it can range from minimal to pretty severe, right? Minimal upper respiratory stuff, I got a cough that doesn't go away, stuff like that. More severe, autism, PANS pandas, that stuff, right? And then there's a whole range of things in between that can happen, right? You see a lot of kids with skin issues. You see a lot of kids with, different systems in the body, like we've talked about. And so there's a wide ranging effect there. I actually had someone on my pod, a doctor on my pod, where we really talked about the autism connection to kids. He's a pediatric specialist, integrated pediatric specialist. And so we really talked about the autism connection on all this stuff. And he's actually built out a full protocol that he's released out to anybody who wants it, any practitioner who wants it, on how to treat and handle autism. In the protocol, there's a specific part where you need to figure out if there's mold in your house. Like that's how much he knows that it impacts it. It's like you can do this protocol, but then you do this. And if this is in the house, then you got to figure this out before you do the other things. It's literally hardwired into his protocol that he does. So like that's the impact that it can have. And so, short term, you're looking at that. Long term, you're looking at the potential of like chronic issues that happen later on in life that you've kind of set the foundation for when they were younger.
Yeah. Now, there's, people go out to like box stores or order like these air filtration systems. Maybe they'll get one for a room, maybe they'll install one for a house. Like, how does that help with mold, or does it?
It does, but there's limitations, right? So we are exposed because we breathe it in. That's how we're exposed, right? So air filtration is helping to clean the airborne air to some extent, right? So if you're reducing what's airborne, there's less for you to breathe. So that's a good thing. It's not like that's not a good thing, right? Now, the challenge is that it can't fix the whole problem, right? So like imagine you're in your room, wherever you are, you're sitting in your room, and in the corner, there's a garbage can and you like set the inside on fire, like you see on TV where they like light a fire in like a tin garbage can, right? And so now there's just smoke coming out of the garbage can, right? In your room, you're filling your room with smoke. And then over here on the other side, you put an air filter over there, right? Technically, is it reducing the amount of smoke in the air? Probably a little bit. Is it keeping up with the amount of smoke that's coming out? No, it's not, right? And so if you're still in the room, in the space, sure, maybe you're getting a reduction, but it's not keeping up and you're still breathing it in, right? And that's sort of the relationship between the two. Air filtration is really, really good as a kind of like a maintenance piece that happens after the fact. And it could provide some short-term relief while you're trying to handle things too, right? So like if I was doing it short-term relief, I'd be saying, all right, where do I spend the most time? It's in my bedroom where I sleep. It's primary place number one. I would be making sure that that room is really well filtered in terms of filtration units, because at least during the time that I'm sleeping, I'm reducing as much as I can in that space, right? And make that kind of the first step as you go in. If you know there's a mold issue in the house, and then you're starting to figure out like, okay, what am I going to remediate or how am I going to handle it, right? Then you can start with that and at least get some immediate reduction in your exposure. The key to this game is not having zero mold exposure because it's not possible. It's not possible, right? So the key to the game when you're like playing out, like how much do I fix? How much do I not fix, right? Like what does that look like? It's understanding like your level of sensitivity or the most sensitive person in your house. And let's say for those listening, I'll just give numbers. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, that person is a 5. That's how sensitive they are, right? And then it's understanding how much mold is in the house. So for ease of this, let's say there's 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 of mold in the house, right? So the goal isn't to get the mold score to 0. The goal is to get the mold score to 4, 3, somewhere under the 5 that the person can handle, right? Now, doing that, it gives your nervous system a chance to breathe a little bit. You're not always on high alert at that point. Your doctor that you're working with can now start to help supplement you and support your 5 to push your 5 to a 6 or push your 5 to a 7, right? So the idea is to reduce the mold down click by click, but then increase your resilience and what you can handle click by click in the opposite direction. So at that point, you then have a pretty big spread between your two numbers, right? If your health now increases to a 7 and your home decreased to a 3 or a 4, that's a big gap in between there. And that might be a spot where you can be totally fine in your house and not have to tear your whole house apart, right? So it's being really strategic on like where the issues are and how you remediate it and how you structure that plan of attack. But yeah, that's kind of the thought process around it. And then the air filtration components become either something you do in the interim as you're getting into the process of figuring that out, definitely on the back end in terms of maintenance, right? So I mean, I have 11 in my house, so like I'm very big on it, but it's important.
Mhm.
And how do people go about testing for the mold and the types, different types, like obviously different types have probably different, um, I don't know, cause different symptoms or they have different reaction can cause different reactions for people, I guess. But like, how would they go about testing for it? I know you said that your company has some test kits, but like, what's the protocol?
Yeah. I mean, on the clinical side, even before we get into the environment stuff, there isn't one perfect test that will tell you if you have a mold issue going on, which is just added to the list of not perfect things that help you
Okay.
understand exactly what's going on. But there are some that people kind of lean toward more than others. I think the three main areas that I've seen doctors look at, they'll actually test you for mycotoxins to see if you have them in your body. Now, there could be false negatives and false positives on that, but I think that the philosophy that like the doctors that I've talked to use is they're trying to create more of a overall picture and they're trying to see, if I have 3 or 4 or 5 items I'm looking at, if 3 of them are spiking one, then it leads me more to think that there's an exposure issue, right? So like the mycotoxin, it's a urine mycotoxin test, that might be one of them. You then start looking at like inflammatory markers like C4a and TGF beta 1 and some of these like inflammatory markers that can come up in like blood testing, right? Say, oh, if I'm having like really high inflammatory markers, then that indicates that there's something going on triggering that inflammatory response that we talked about earlier, right? So that's another lens you could look at it under. Then there's other types of testing. It's called organic acid testing, where they actually look at different chemical acids in the body and figure out, based on what they're seeing, is it leaning towards there possibly being an environmental exposure that's triggering specific levels in those, right? So there's a few different ways that they look at it. The challenge with the body is the body is incredibly complex and it can hide things and it can not show you stuff right away, right? There's like all these different things that happen. Like, for example, that mycotoxin test I was talking about, if you're somebody who's in that 24% of people that can't detox very well, and you just have a really, really bad methylation detoxification setup in your body, you might be really loaded with mycotoxins, but do a urine mycotoxin test and it shows up 0. And the reason it shows up 0 is because you literally can't move it out of your body,
Mm.
right? So you might get a false negative on a urine test because your body is so toxic and so unable to move it that it just doesn't even come out when you're extracting it out. So there's like variables like that in the body, like inflammatory markers, some of them have to be within a certain amount of time of when the trigger happened, right? And so there's a timing component. The thing about the house testing is like all of that like intricate body system stuff that we don't even fully understand how our bodies work anyway, like all of that kind of gets taken off the table and it's incredibly linear and simple to understand what's going on. If you're starting way at the just top level and the question is, do I even have a mole problem? I'm listening to Brian talk and like, yeah, I've got a couple symptoms on different systems in my body, or like, oh, my kid is feeling this, and my husband did tell me this. Like, if any of these are like triggering, or we did leave and we came back and we felt better. but you don't know for sure, and your doctor hasn't really kind of like honed in on it for you, then the place actually, that I would recommend starting is at just a high level screening test of the house, right? Like, let's just see if there's a high mold load in here. Let's not be concerned about where it's coming from yet, right? That's where it gets a little more specific, but let's just see generally, is there a problem going on, right? And so with that, dust collection and dust analysis is the best way to understand if you have a mold issue in your house. Because as particles and things settle or float in the air, gravity brings them down to surfaces, and it creates a really good foundation to understand what is popping in the air and settling back down and accumulating over time. So you can go to the dust reservoirs in the house and you can analyze down to DNA sequencing levels. So a lot of people know what PCR is now after COVID, right? So there's PCR testing specifically for mold species that the EPA created a panel for. And so you can actually do that analysis on those, and we can understand what is just the load of mold in your house. Is it a high load? Is it a medium load? Is it a low load, right? And then from there, you can then decide, is this something I need to dig more into? Or is this something that I don't need to dig more into, right? And so for us, we created a test called the dust test that leverages the EPA technology, and then we overlay an interpretation that essentially tells you that load factor that you have in your house, right? And so it's literally called the dust test, thedusttest.com. But that's so you can start with that, and that'll give you a general feel. And then if you're someone who is symptomatic or you're having more complex issues, and then you see that you have a moderate to high load of mold in the house, then the next step is like, okay, I'm having these issues. I'm seeing that there's an environmental trigger. Now we got to dig into this and figure out how to reduce that, right? And then that's where you kind of dig into inspections and identifying exactly where the sources live and where they're hiding and prioritizing how to remediate.
Yeah. All I could think about was, I hope you don't find dust in my house. I'm a hygienist, like cleaning is my thing.
Can I tell you something? The number of houses I've been in, even like super expensive houses where they have whole teams of people that clean their houses, there's dust everywhere. Find it
Yeah,
every single time.
right. You
And
just have to move the right piece of furniture.
yeah, I sometimes almost like it's fun for me to, if the client's a fun client, you could tell, right? But like if they're fun to be like, hey, they missed over here, I've got it. And it's like, but it's hard, and it actually speaks to like how this stuff moves through the house. It's just stuff moves everywhere, and it's really difficult, but it does move up into your breathing zone and create this cloud that kind of follows you as you move around the house. And so it is really important. The cleaning, the same as what I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be to zero, right? But if you're reducing dust and particle that's settled on surfaces by 50, 60, 70%, that's 50, 60, 70% less stuff that can pop up into your face that you could breathe eventually, right? So it's great to have like very good dust maintenance, cleaning maintenance like that.
hmm What about like cleaning like vents and like, our heat is going through the ventilation system or ACs? Like how often or is that necessary to get those ducts cleaned? What
Oh,
impact
100,
does that?
100%. It's actually even necessary to test them to see what their situation is in the house, right? So when you think about like how someone is impacted in a home and like what ultimately gets to their face, which is what they're breathing, right? There's kind of like a downstream of things that add to that. The first thing is, where is the source? Generally, the source is a source, I should say, is like, behind a wall or behind a shower in a ceiling or under a cabinet or something. So the first part is like figure out where is the factory that's creating the mold problem, right? That's the first thing you have to figure out, right? Now, if you imagine a factory in your head, you have the building where the factory is, and then the smoke comes out the top of the factory, right? So what's happening is that while they're making, let's say it's a mold factory, while they're making the mold inside, the smoke is actually what's coming out in the main breathing area. Okay. So now if you walk outside your yard, you live down the street from the factory, now you start breathing in the smoke, and that is your pathway to exposure. So while you're not directly breathing the mold colony or the factory where it's happening, you're being impacted by the byproducts it creates. The same pathway and formula happens in the house. So if I have a mold factory hidden behind a wall somewhere, the smoke that comes out from that is going to move into the main living spaces of the house and be mold spores, fragments, mold toxins will kind of float off of that colony and move into the main living space. Once it gets there, two things are going to happen. One, your heating and air conditioning system is going to suck it up. because when you turn that system on, it sucks air from your house in order to cool it and put it back in, right?
Mhm.
So one way that your heating air conditioning systems can become impacted is if you do have sources of issues in your house, and every time your air conditioner or your heater turns on, it's sucking that in and it can become cross-contaminated. In a cross-contaminated system, when you open it, there's not mold all over it. There's just dirt and dust and particle in there, right? And so a lot of times your HVAC person will be like, oh, this looks fine. There's no problems with it. I don't see anything, right? It's the composition of the dust and the particle that's in there. Are there toxins in that particle, right? Or are there not, right? What's the load of mold fragments in that particle? It's nothing the human eye can see, right? So that we always want to, we always open and inspect those things. We want to test them. We want to understand what their load is. So then we can have the conversation about what you just asked, which is the system cleanable, or is it a primary source of what's driving my exposure in the house?
Mhm.
Because that becomes really important. If you remediate your house and your HVAC system's contaminated and you come back in and it continues to blow that out in the house, you're still going to have the same health reactions. And then people will think, oh, my remediation failed, or it's you can never live in a house because there's mold everywhere. That's not really it. The problem is you didn't find it, slash you didn't prioritize how to address it in a way that was going to have the best impact for you. So the HVAC is a big piece of that. The other way when stuff comes out, the smoke from that factory is what we talked about, how gravity brings it down to the surfaces, right? So that's what we're talking about with dust testing.
Mhm.
So those are the two ways that it pops into your breathing zone. So the first thing in that scenario is, while you go back to the analogy of I walk outside of my house and I have all the smoke from the factory over here, right? And someone tells you, oh man, you live in a place with a really bad pollution problem. Like, yeah, but yes, but I actually live in a place with a factory problem. That's my problem. The pollution is the secondary impact of the factory. So while I do, yes, have a pollution problem, my core problem is this factory down the street over here that keeps pumping it out. That's my problem, right? And so as we go through the house, the idea is, where are the factories? How many are there? Where are the biggest factories? And let's start by trying to shut down the biggest factories, right? And that becomes kind of the concept as we go through it.
Mhm. Very interesting. So, how would somebody get started? Suppose one of our listeners thinks, I need to investigate this a little bit farther. Where do they start?
Yeah, so there's two paths you can do. One, you can just go to the dusttest.com and order a dust test, and then you can see, right? Just do a it's literally like a Swiffer cloth. You just like clean basically with it, and then you can see what's going on there. The second option is you talk through, what's an inspection look like, right? And for us, so We Inspect is my inspection business. Yes, weinspect.com is our website, and we have phone number, we have a button you can click to book a call with us. We do free, conversations with people to talk through what's going on with them and to see if we feel like, there might be an issue going on and what that would look like, right? So anyone who's like thinking or considering like going down the road, it's worth the call, right?
Mhm.
And then those are kind of your two paths, right? And you see how you are. But the first thing I would do is like assess yourself, right? Like, do I feel like my health or my lifestyle is being impacted or hurt in some way by something, and I wish that it was better, right? And then we start thinking about those different scenarios that I talked about, and is it possible there's an environmental trigger that's causing this, right? And so if you're not totally sure, then the dust test, start there, right? It's super easy. You'll see it. It'll be really clear that you'll see it. And if not, you could always dig into the other piece and go straight to inspection.
Yeah. So, your company inspects and you give a treatment plan, let's say. Do you actually do the remediation yourself, or is that something that's outsourced?
We don't. So another company would execute our plan. So it's
Okay.
like a conflict for me to come into your house and be like, I found 100 things. And by the way, I'm going to fix all 100 of them, right? Like that's, it's kind of a conflict. So for us, our role is diagnosis and game plan. And
Mhm.
then a different remediator would come in, execute the game plan. I always like joke around, like anybody who watched Grey's Anatomy. We're like Meredith Grey. We like figure out what's going on and tell you how to fix it. And then the remediators are like Shepherd that go in and do the surgery. Like that's how it works.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. So, yeah, so they can just go on your website and find out information, right?
Absolutely. It's easy. Yesweinspect.com.
Yeah, and we'll
Button
have all
right
that.
on the front, phone number on the front. Easy.
Great. Great. And we'll have the information in the show notes for our audience who is interested in finding out more about it. I know Sabrina was interested in knowing more about the HEPA filters and things that are in a lot of dental offices. You know, that was a big thing in COVID because we use a lot of aerosols with, the things that we do as hygienists and dentistry and running drills. And so HEPA filters was something that was certainly encouraged and actually mandated in some areas. And so Sabrina was wondering, like, how does that affect air quality and how often do somebody need to change those filters? Like, I'm wondering, some filters, it's probably been since COVID since they had a new one.
Yeah, I mean, on the effectiveness piece of it, so it's the type of filter. So HEPA is like the minimum I would ever do. Like there's better.
Mm,
But for context, HEPA gets you down. So if you're talking the size of a particle, it's measured in a unit called a micron. So a HEPA filter is zero point 0.3 microns in size. There are other filtration options out there that will filter down to, so remember we said zero point 0.3, that will filter down to like 0.01, 0.007 as opposed to zero point 0.3, right? So
no.
like very, very
Mm,
much small, very much smaller
mm,
particle size than what HEPA is. And it's really important because specifically when you're talking mold and even mycotoxins, the size of the fragments are smaller than HEPA. So they're going to go right through it. They're not, it's not going to grab it as effectively. So getting down to these smaller particle size filtration options is really how you're going to get the fragments that break off of colonies and the mycotoxins that might be floating around more effectively. So that's what those are the types in terms of filtration size that I'd be looking at. There's a couple of companies out there. IntelliPure is one. IQ Air is another one. Air Doctor is another one. So there's some options out there that have some of these different more tight filtration sizes. And then in terms of frequency, um, a lot of these units will tell you when they need to be changed. Like they'll have like a sensor that'll tell you when they need to be changed. Um, I'm doing at least twice a year if you need to change the filters in them. And when you pull them out after 6 months, they are gross. Like they are black, right? And then it just makes you wonder, this is what was floating around in my house that actually got here. And this didn't even get everything that was floating around in my house, right? Like this just got what was right here. So it's we all filter our water. Like it's like a no-brainer. Like I would never drink water out of a pipe because ew, gross, right? Like I know what these pipes look like. If any of you have ever seen behind a wall, it's gross. There's debris, there's insulation fiberglass fibers, there's rodent droppings, there's dead insects, there's all this stuff back there. All of that comes into our living space. It all works in the same way that you have that gross pipe with all the crap in it. And and then you turn your water on and it looks clean, but you know where it came from, right? So of course we filter our water. Everyone does it for the most part. The fact that this isn't just like standard, we filter the air that we breathe is crazy to me. But it's just because I'm in the world, right?
right.
But if you think about it,
The
you take,
difference.
yeah, you take 20,000 breaths a day, every day, 20,000 times you breathe in when you do that. Which, if you're thinking like, how much is that? Like the volume of that, it's the size of a standard swimming pool in your backyard, is how much air you breathe every single day. What if that swimming pool had toxins in it and you just jumped and swam in it 24 hours a day? Like that's the equivalent of what's happening with exposure in homes. And because we can't see it, we don't think about it, right? But that's the equivalent. It's that big. That volume is how much we're literally pumping into our bodies every single day. And if you have high mold loads and inflammatory triggers and all that stuff, that's why the air quality is so important in how a body is functioning.
Well, I also think, like, I don't know, but this is my thing. People who walk around with those water bottles that, like, you can't see and you can't clean them very well. To me, it drives me bananas because I always, like, know that when you look in there, like, I've looked really close and you see, like, there's, like, mold starting to grow sometimes, you really have to scrub really hard. I don't know how many people actually do that. And I think that sometimes can get people feeling not well, right? Like, can it not? Like, it make you, it's bacteria, it's stuff that you're taking into your system. So,
It's the
um,
food you drink, the water you drink, the air you breathe. Like that's the biggest piece of what's like between eating, drinking, and breathing, pretty much everything you do every day. So like it's a big component of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just grosses me up. So that's all, like, I
Yeah.
just, like, I think, like, I don't know how, like, that, it's just part and parcel with the water. And then if you have not cleaning your vessel properly, that's like a double whammy right there, right? For everyday intake. So, yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an easy one. That's an easy one
easy
to do.
one to,
For sure.
like, fix first and foremost,
Absolutely.
right? But
Absolutely.
anyway,
Well,
yeah.
Brian, I think your information was both scary and amazing at the same
Yeah,
time.
exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot. It's tough because you're talking about something nobody knows about, right? And so the initial thought is, oh, it's something else to be afraid of, or oh, there's another thing that's out to get me, right? So what I would say to people, two things. One, if you're humming along and you're not feeling a certain way, cool, it's great, right? You don't necessarily have to take like incredible action because you don't have any sort of pain or impact that's bothering you to that extent, right? If you're proactive and you want to check it out, more power to you. You can do that, right? For the people who are impacted and they are going and trying to figure this stuff out and they're just not getting the progress that they need, this becomes almost like a beacon of hope of like, there's something here that there's a real explanation about why I'm not progressing the way that people want me to, right? And it allows people to kind of get into that and understand that. And there are so many people that we work with, the doctors that I know work with, where this is the core problem that's then triggering other things that are going on in the body. And once this gets handled, they progress and they progress well, right? And so for somebody who's listening and you're not optimal right now and you're not where you want to be, I don't want it to sound overwhelming and like scary. I want it to sound hopeful. Like there is a path that you can go down that has proven time and time and time again to have a very positive impact on people, and to not be afraid of it, like to explore it, right? You don't always know what you don't know yet, but at least be open to talking about it because once people take that first step and they're like, hey, I'm gonna consider this. Let me stick my toe in the water over here and see what this looks like. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden you realize that there's something there that now is very validating to what's going on. There's now a path. There's a path back to getting better. And I think that's like it's the reason that we do this, right? Like I remember the first time somebody told me I saved their life, and it's not the first time. It's happened many times.
Mhm.
And it's because of these types of things have such an impact on people. So um yeah, try not to be too scared. I know it's a lot to take in on a single episode, but try not to be too scared. And we can always talk to you about it if you want to.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Brian, thank you so much. You were certainly very insightful. I learned a lot myself about air quality and just the impact of mold. I'd already heard about like mold, and I've worked with a few clients who have had mold issues and just some, you know, lingering effects of they lived in a moldy house, they moved, but they still had these lingering effects that, they're still dealing with. So I've worked with a number of patients or clients who have done that. And talking about this, I think is great because it might clue in some people who maybe have been going to the doctor for years and have just had no answers. And
Mhm.
they know because you live with yourself 24/7, they know in their gut things aren't right, but yet there's no test to tell them that something's wrong. And so they live with this compromised immune system or this compromised life, not being able to do the things they want. So thank you for bringing this to the forefront because I can definitely think that there would be patients or people out there that will certainly be interested in learning more about mold.
Well, I'm very happy to. Thank you for having me, give me the opportunity to talk to more people. I feel like that this is something that's incredibly important. And so anytime someone shares their platform with me to scream from the mountaintop, I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. And we
thank you so
will
much.
say goodbye for now. And yeah, until next time, Lifestyle Herbalist.